Yeah, and welcome back to Block TV, where it is time for CryptoGlobe. That's the point in time where we take a trip around the world to hear about the latest developments in the industry. And to guide us through the tour, as in every week, none other than Ethan Pierce, director of the Paris-based Crypto Assets Institute, who joins us this month, actually, from Dayton, Ohio, U.S., where he's celebrating that special holiday season. Great to have you.
Family time, always a good thing.
Exactly. Family, community, that's all that we're about. And speaking of communities, big news over the course of the last 10 days in the crypto sphere, and that would be the Virgil Griffith news. You're in the United States. That's a story that crossed over to mainstream media. I'm speaking, of course, of the Ethereum developer who decided to go to North Korea and give a speech there, after which, when he tried to come back home for Thanksgiving, he was arrested, already out on bail, but being charged with breaking quite a few laws and possibly facing 20 years in jail. Is he being scapegoated?
I think there's a couple different ways to come at this. I think obviously the people who are threatened by crypto are going to put pressure where they can put pressure. But I think in this case, it's pretty obvious when you ask permission, which you have to do whenever you want to travel from country to country, especially whenever you want to travel to one that has sanctions, and you are told no, then you can't plead ignorance. It has similar echoes in some ways to me to some of what we saw with the ICO thing of just people being like, oh, I didn't know there were rules. And obviously the rules there weren't quite defined, and that's why some of the punishment has been light or less than it could be. But the point is that at a certain point in time, whether it's securities regulation, whether it's sanctions and international law, if there are rules that you're supposed to follow and you choose not to, either through simple ignorance of not knowing about those laws or willfully, then there can be penalties to that. So I think that on one side, you have a clear problem of him violating travel restrictions and not, he shouldn't be doing what he's doing in terms of traveling here. I think there's nuance legally about whether or not providing general crypto information violates, the spirit of providing economic aid. Or some way of looking at that idea, because even if he didn't specifically talk about how to go around sanctions and how to use crypto for money laundering or other things, is there a way that this can still be interpreted as aiding the North Korean state, which is under sanctions, to benefit economically? I think that there's a space there where he is clearly wrong, and it was a very silly thing to do. And then I think there's also obviously a space, maybe this is the lesson to take from this for everybody else, kind of the chilling effect of this is you have to play by the rules. Disruption is not, it's not a gentle word. Yeah. We're not kindly disrupting, the financial system through crypto assets and cryptocurrencies. We are, the potential here has significant change effect on the way that things run and the way the established order has made a lot of money and has a significant amount of control over things. I don't think that it is wrong for a government which issues you a passport which allows you certain travel rights that there are rules that potentially come with that. If you go against that, there are sanctions and potentially for you yourself. And I don't know that this is a nefarious thing.
I was about to say, I don't think it's, maybe he wasn't nefarious, but, as I tell my 5-year-old, if you break the rules, there will be consequences.
And you can't just plead ignorance. He did ask permission and was told no. I think that the general consensus of what the messages I seem to see flying around Twitter and everywhere else is this was a very silly thing to do on his part, and then the way to communicate around it and to handle it was just very poorly done on his part. So he is going to. There's a certain part of that where I think he probably deserves the sanctions that come his way for violating a piece of that. Whether or not it goes all the way into this 20-year you're trying to help money laundering and go around the sanctions in a direct way, kind of extreme version,
Right.
that seems a
That's
little bit
debatable. The intense.
much as well.
Entirely.
So.
But let's move into, the progress that's being made within the sphere, and Germany to the rescue, one can say. A new law in Germany. Yeah, I know. Wunderbar, wie man sagt. Crypto heaven in Germany. The legislation enables Germany actually passed a law, right, according to the Handelsblatt newspaper, that makes it very, very appealing to people from the sphere. Tell me more about it.
So I think what's funny here is every time a country wakes up and decides it needs to do innovation, they say they're going to be the next Silicon Valley or the next startup nation. And now every time a government decides to pass a law, anything to do with crypto assets, they suddenly become the new crypto haven, crypto heaven, crypto nation, whatever that might be.
Shangri-La, whatever you want. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's just funny how every time a new law comes up every week now we're the leader in the crypto regulation space. That said, I think this is really exciting, not only as an ecosystem that is very strong in blockchain and crypto in terms of Germany, but also the fact that in the EU, these changes will have rippling effects because we are dealing with this will push back up and then to the EU and potentially over and down to other member states, the fact that these laws are being modified. And to that point, what they've done is that they've the law that was just passed, and it was passed actually by the Parliament and the Council, so it goes into effect on January 1st, modifies the fourth anti-money laundering directive of the EU that basically said that banks were not allowed to deal directly in cryptocurrency. So the fact of modifying that means that now European banks can get into the game, at least especially in Germany at this point. And I think that's really exciting. I think this is going to have European effects and not just German effects. But the idea was very simple. Banks and financial institutions can't get into, if people are pushing the fact that it seems like institutionals are being very slow to get into crypto, some of that is true. Some of it is just general risk tolerance in the way that they operate, but it's also potentially from a regulatory perspective in terms of compliance that they don't have the right to do things based on the way laws are currently in place in a specific jurisdiction. And that is the case here, where the anti-money laundering directive made it very clear you're not, as a bank, you cannot deal directly with cryptocurrencies, so they can't get into it. Well, now that this is going to be lifted as of January 1st, that's going to create some very interesting things. There's actually a flip side to it. So as the banks now get pulled to the center in terms of being able to do it, all of the stuff that's already there, like the exchanges and custody solutions, now also have to change because they all will have to have a specific license. So if they don't go through that process, then Binance or whoever wouldn't have the right to operate in Germany until they go through that process. So it's not just about providing an on-ramp to the banks. It also means that other people who want to play in this space need to now follow through with a different kind of onboarding situation through licensing that they didn't have in the same way before. So there were a couple different things that were interesting. There wasn't a specific crypto ban
in Germany,
but this was just about this was just a regulatory issue around the anti-money laundering directive. There was in the earlier version of this bill a separation clause which said that the banks would not be allowed to deal with this directly, but they would have to use some kind of a solution for custody, some kind of an external provider that was doing this. That has been lifted so that the banks can do can actually do this internally, which I think is interesting. The Association of German Banks, which is a lobbying group of 200 different financial institutions in Germany, was very positive about this. And their quote was, "Credit institutions are experienced in the safekeeping of client assets and in risk management, are committed to investor protection, and have always been controlled by the financial supervision. So as such, banks could effectively prevent money laundering and terrorist financing with crypto assets." So the thought being that who better than to be able to deal with managing your crypto assets from a custody perspective and other issues than the people who've already been doing that. I think that's a bit of a stretch. I think we can probably find lots of good startups and fintech companies that are also going to be able to do that who haven't been doing this historically in other assets. But I think it's at least applaudable that we are recognizing that banks can get into this and be a value add to this idea. And I think it's extremely important to not have people run away from your country to other jurisdictions in order to deal with crypto. So
because there's still a system in place, and at the end of the day, you know, one can always argue maybe you beat the system within the system. But speaking of banks in Europe, further north from Germany, Nordea wins the Danish court battle to ban staff trading in Bitcoin. Seems like one step forward, two steps back. Tell me more about that. That also happened this week.
So I think they announced wanting to do this a little over a year ago, and the union of the employees at the bank, which represent around, I believe there's around 31,000 employees at Nordea, filed suit against this, basically saying that this has to do with the private financial lives of these employees. So it's none of Nordea's business. Nordea fires back and says, well, the problem is this creates a risk issue. It also creates a competence issue if our employees are doing things in the space. So it's a curious thing. Basically, the risks are too high because the cryptocurrency markets aren't regulated or because there's volatility or whatever. However, if you know, Nordea commercializes anything in crypto, you know, that would be okay.
That would help.
You as an employee
cannot do that.
Cannot partake. Which, you know, so they've lost this case, which means that this will go into effect for these 31,000 employees of Nordea. What's interesting that they push back this idea that there's risk around money laundering or transparency or other things. And as Twitter has been happy to jump in and point out, Nordea itself has had several issues the past 2 years around potential suspicious transactions, which Reuters reported for around $700 million that were linked to Russia and some potentially suspicious behavior. The Danish state actually searched the bank's offices in June as part of a criminal investigation into money laundering. And Sweden has actually warned the company as well that they are not quite following the rules around money laundering. At least these are the things that have been reported. If all that's true, then it's kind of funny that you're telling your employees, we can't trust you to behave with crypto, but it would appear that when it comes to transparency and anti-money laundering regulations, there might be other issues to deal with. So kind of an odd thing. I just wonder how do you enforce this in the sense of, I mean, I get if people are declaring this in a forthright way, but as we've seen, a lot of people play in crypto and don't declare it and are able to hide that pretty well. So how exactly
how do you enforce it is the $1 million question.
You're going to penalize the honest employees, but everybody else who has a clue about this is going to go out to a different exchange and or using somebody else's, you know, their spouse or friend's identity or all the ways that people seem to have gone around KYC with exchanges and deal with this anyway. So I don't think it's going to be very effective, but I do think it's unfortunate. It's kind of a bad signal to send. I think there should just be some kind of a system in place where employees have to declare, be transparent about what they're investing into, like they would in any case.
Right.
And you know, no conflicts of interest if they're working in the space, and it's what they're professionally providing advice to people that there's you know they're paying attention to the rules they already have when it comes to conflicts of interest and any kind of side benefits they might be getting out of being in crypto and pushing a specific crypto asset or investment, and then also providing that information to other people, potentially as their job, and then doing it personally. All that stuff kind of wrapped together needs to be handled, but just shutting it off seems rather nearsighted on their part and doesn't seem like it could possibly be effective.
No, entirely. I'm wondering if maybe we should, you know, just recommend to all their employees to move to Germany. That's a joke. But that's it. Let's move to the other side of the globe, because India making strides. Never mind, you know, we reported on India about a week ago because Binance has entered it in a way, making strides into India with a purchase. But now the Indian government is hopping on the train, preparing, as you pinpointed, a national framework to support blockchain, or a national blockchain framework. What does that mean?
So It would appear that they're taking kind of the path that some of the stuff we've reported recently on Korea and other jurisdictions of being extremely pro blockchain, but still anti crypto. And so in this instance, I don't think this is a mixed message. I think it's very similar to what we're seeing in Korea, and that conversation is evolving. But the early version of that, which was, we're going to have an entire crypto in Busan, have this entire kind of region that is dedicated to figuring out how to work with blockchain on a governmental level and to encourage that in a sandbox kind of a way. But we're going to be anti-crypto in terms of exchanges and regulations and how we're dealing with that. That seems to be exactly what's been put into place here. They've got all kinds of great projects they've already been working on. They have this distributed center of excellence in blockchain technology that is already been building quite a few different projects. That is actually a government and research institution partnership between the Center for Development of Advanced Computing and the Institute for Development and Research in Banking Technology. All of that stuff together has been, they developed a system for using blockchain to manage property registration in the Telangana state. They've developed a proof of concept solution for cloud security assurance and some KYC and trade finance stuff. There's lots of projects going on. Another project around authentifying academic certificates. All of that is historical. This isn't new, but they're creating basically a government framework to make this be more organized and more providing guidelines for all of these institutions to work together in order to advance this faster and better. But it doesn't change the crypto conversation. This is still, as was still recently proposed, that crypto should be illegal, or at least private crypto. What was your question?
No, I said right, and no question. I'm saying, it's once again, one step forward, two steps back. But Ethan, I can't thank you. I cannot thank you enough for joining us today. This time, as we said, from Dayton, Ohio. I want to thank you once again for shedding so much light on so many various issues. Happy holidays to you. We'll see you next week.
Always a pleasure.
Thanks. Thank you.
For more news and updates, follow us on Twitter.